There is a grove in the heel of Italy where the oldest trees you have ever seen are dying. You walk between them, and the silence is wrong. Olive trees are supposed to move. They are supposed to catch the light in their leaves and turn it. These do not. Their branches are grey and bare, the wood dry and cracked, the canopy gone. Mile after mile of them, each one standing the way something stands when it has run out of reasons to stand. An agronomist named Giovanni Melcarne walked through groves like this in early 2016 past dead tree after dead tree and said there was nothing left to say. His own trees looked the same. Some of these trees were alive in the Roman Empire. Some were old when Columbus set sail. One, which the locals call the church tree, had been growing for at least 1,500 years when it was infected. The bacterium responsible for killing it is carried by a sap-feeding insect about the size of a sesame seed. The bacterium itself is smaller than a grain of pollen. It arrived from Latin America, most likely on an ornamental plant, sometime around 2008. By the time scientists identified it, in 2013, it had already been moving through the region's 60 million olive trees for years. There is no cure. Once a tree is infected, it will die. There is an old proverb in this part of Italy, "L'oiu te ulia lu male porta via." Olive oil will take away all evil. Not this time. The food at the center of this catastrophe is the same food that anointed the athletes of ancient Greece, provisioned the armies of Rome, and lit the lamps in every major civilization of the Mediterranean world for 8,000 years. It is the same food that, just 3 years before these trees began dying in visible numbers, had been put aboard a rocket and sent to orbit the planet. The world ran on it. To understand why the dying of these trees feels like losing something deeper than a harvest, you have to go back to the beginning, to a village that no longer exists, not because it was destroyed, but because the sea swallowed it whole. 8,000 years ago, a small settlement stood on the shore of what is now northern Israel, on the coastal plain south of Haifa. Its name, given to it by the archaeologists who eventually found it, is Kfar Samir. When the ice ages ended and sea levels rose, the Mediterranean covered the village completely. For millennia, it sat on the sea floor, sealed under a protective layer of marine sand that preserved its contents in ways that a dry air excavation rarely can. When underwater archaeologists finally reached it, they found stone-crushing basins, pits packed with thousands of crushed olive stones, and fragments of woven reed baskets that had once been used to strain a liquid. The oldest documented evidence of olive oil production on Earth. It was happening here, on this submerged shore, somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago. Here is the detail that makes the whole history strange. People were making oil from olives before they were eating olives. A fresh olive plucked from the tree is bitter, not sharp bitter, the way citrus pith is. Persistent, aggressively, coatingly bitter, with an astringency that stays on the tongue for minutes. You cannot simply eat one. The wild oleaster that covered the eastern Mediterranean was low and gnarled and thorny, its fruit small and dark and entirely unremarkable. Nothing about it suggested abundance. It offered nothing a fig or a grape could not do better. But if you crushed it, something happened. The oil that came out smelled green and grassy, sharp at the back of the throat, with something almost floral underneath. It burned cleanly in a lamp. It softened skin. It preserved food without spoiling the way animal fat spoiled. In Neolithic terms, that combination was close to a miracle. Pottery shards from the nearby site of Ain Zippori in the Lower Galilee, some dated to approximately 5,800 BCE, still contained olive oil in chemical traces so close to modern oil that researchers describe the resemblance as remarkable. 8,000 years in the ground, nearly the same composition as what you would pour on a salad tonight. From the Carmel coast, cultivation spread inland and westward. The ancient city of Ebla, in what is now Syria, was recording olive oil production and trade by around 2400 BCE. Minoan Crete was cultivating olives by at least 2500 BCE. The submerged village of Haifa was already 2,000 years in the past. But what those Neolithic people pressed out of an unpromising bitter fruit had started something that could not be stopped. Someone on Crete looked at what they had, and they spent the next 1,000 years figuring out exactly how much of it they could make. The palace at Knossos on the island of Crete had storage rooms that held enormous clay jars called pithoi, packed full of olive oil. You can see the impressions of where they sat in the ruins today, row after row in the cool underground chambers. This was not household supply. This was national infrastructure. The Minoan civilization, which flourished from around 3000 BCE, built its wealth and its trade networks on olive oil, the way later empires would build theirs on coal or iron. The Phoenicians spread the tree westward, to Cyprus, to North Africa, to Spain. The Greeks received it and did something the Phoenicians had not quite managed. They made it sacred. The olive tree became Athena's gift to the city of Athens. The oil was used in everything, cooking and ceremony and lamplight and athletic ritual. Greek athletes anointed their bodies with olive oil before competitions, rubbing it in before the contest and scraping it off after, taking the dust and sweat of the arena with it. The Mycenaean Linear B tablets, the oldest written records in the Greek language, from roughly 1600 BCE to 1100 BCE, already catalogue olive oil's uses in careful detail. Then came Solon. Around 640 BCE, the great lawmaker of Athens passed a series of regulations governing trade. Among them was a single rule that tells you everything about what olive oil had become. It was the only commodity permitted to leave the city-state. Everything else stayed inside. One thing, and only this one thing, could be exported. At the Panathenaic Games, the festival held every 4 years in honor of Athena, victors were awarded prize amphorae filled with olive oil. A first-place finisher in a prestige event could take home 5 tons. 5 tons, more than any single person could consume in years, a fortune in clay and gold. Picture the docks at Piraeus, the port of Athens, the smell of resin and clay and sea, 2-handled amphorae stacked and loaded, thousands of them, bound for every corner of the Mediterranean. This was not local commerce. This was a system. Rome made the system civilizational. The Roman Empire traded roughly 23 million kilograms of olive oil every year. Citizens consumed approximately 2 liters each per person per month. In Libya, a single production facility operated 17 presses and generated 100,000 liters annually. And in Rome itself, on the west bank of the Tiber, there is a hill, not a natural one. Monte Testaccio, 50 meters high, is made entirely of the broken shards of an estimated 53 million olive oil amphorae, smashed and discarded there over a period of 260 years. Archaeologists estimate they represent 6.5 billion liters of imported oil. A hill of broken jars, a monument to an appetite so vast it left a mountain behind. The Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CE. The greatest supply chain the ancient world had ever built stopped. The question now was whether the olive could survive without the civilization it had fed. It could, but not everywhere, not easily, not without losing ground first. In the centuries after Rome fell, olive oil production in northern and western Europe contracted sharply. The great networks of pressed and traded oil pulled back toward the Mediterranean. The cookbooks of medieval Europe tell a different story in the north. Butter, lard, drippings from the fire. In England and France, olive oil was a luxury, a foreign thing. It sat in medicine cabinets more than kitchens. The wealthy used it in small amounts. Everyone else used what was local. In the Mediterranean, things were different. Christianity kept demand alive in ways no market force could have sustained on its own. Olive oil was sacramental. You anointed the sick with it. You burned it in church lamps. During Lent, when animal fats were forbidden, you cooked with it. Monasteries took on the role the Roman trading houses had vacated. They pressed oil, stored it, and moved it through ecclesiastical networks across southern Europe. They preserved the knowledge even when the trade was gone. Then the Islamic expansion reshaped the whole picture. From the 7th century onward, the new territories of Al-Andalus, in what is now Spain, were governed by rulers who had strong reasons to favor olive oil. Pork was forbidden, certain animal fats were restricted, and plant-based oil fit both religious and culinary culture perfectly. Arab agronomists improved irrigation and cultivation techniques across the Iberian Peninsula. The great physician Avicenna, writing in the 11th century, documented olive oil's medicinal properties in terms that would be cited for centuries. The Arabic word for the olive, zaytun, and the Arabic word for oil, zayt, passed directly into Spanish. Aceituna, aceite. Half the Spanish vocabulary for olive oil is Arabic. That fingerprint tells you who saved it when it needed saving most. And alongside all of this, running parallel through the centuries like a hidden current, was fraud. A 5th century Roman cookbook described, in specific practical instructions, how to make cheap Spanish oil resemble expensive Italian oil by adding minced herbs and roots. The scam was 1,500 years old before the empire had finished falling. The oil was worth faking. Nothing worth faking is ordinary. The knowledge survived, the trade survived, the sacred uses survived. But something was coming that none of them, not religion or commerce or the stubbornness of ancient trees, could defend against. It had traveled without a passport, most likely tucked inside an ornamental plant shipped from Costa Rica sometime around 2008, small enough to be invisible, and it would unmake something that had taken 8,000 years to build. It started quietly. In the autumn of 2010, olive farmers in the Salento region of Puglia, the flat heel at the bottom of Italy, began noticing something wrong with their branches. The leaves at the tips were drying out, turning brown, curling inward. The phenomenon spread from branch to branch, then tree to tree. Nobody knew what it was. They called it olive quick decline syndrome. That was a description, not a diagnosis. By 2013, scientists from Italy's National Research Council had identified the cause: Xylella fastidiosa, a bacterium known in the Americas for over a century, where it attacked coffee and grapes and peaches. It had never been detected in Europe. Research published later confirmed it had almost certainly arrived around 2008 on an ornamental plant imported from Costa Rica, carried by a tiny sap-feeding insect called a spittlebug. When a spittlebug feeds on an infected leaf, it takes the bacterium into its saliva. Every plant it touches afterward is inoculated. There is no cure. Once a tree is infected, it will not recover. The only containment strategy is to cut down infected trees and create buffer zones before the spittlebugs can carry it further. This is where the catastrophe became human. Puglia has 60 million olive trees. Many of them are not old the way trees in a garden are old the way history is old. Trees that were growing when Frederick II marched through the region on his way to the Crusades in the 13th century. Trees that were already ancient when the Black Death swept Europe. The church tree had been alive for at least 1,500 years. The Pugliesi treated these trees like grandparents, permanent, immovable, older than memory. When the Italian government and the European Union ordered infected trees cut down, tens of thousands of people refused. Farmers chained themselves to trunks, protesters blocked railways. In 2016, Governor Michele Emiliano dismissed the regional Xylella task force, calling the scientists' containment plan devastating. He said the olive tree was too culturally significant to be treated like a disease crop. In December 2015, prosecutors from the city of Lecce opened criminal investigations into the scientists and officials who had been pushing for eradication. The trees were not cut. The bacterium spread. By the time the scale of the disaster became impossible to deny, at least 1/3 of Puglia's 60 million trees were infected. In the southernmost groves, entire horizons were grey and bare. Yield losses in the oldest orchards reached 91%. Before Xylella, Italy routinely produced more than 500,000 tons of olive oil per year. Now, 300,000 tons is considered a good harvest. The local proverb says olive oil will take away all evil. In the grey, leafless fields of Salento, the proverb has no answer. The disease has since crossed into France, Spain, and Portugal. No one has stopped it yet. Walk into a supermarket in Spain in 2023 and look for the olive oil. In one of the great olive-producing countries on Earth, the bottles are behind glass, secured like pharmacy medication. People have been stealing it. What the Xylella epidemic started, drought finished. In 2022 and 2023, the Mediterranean endured severe drought across its major growing regions. Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, all of them underproducing at the same time. Stocks collapsed, prices went vertical. In January 2024, the global wholesale price of olive oil hit a record $10,281 per metric ton. In European retail, a kilogram cost €9.20. People in Italy were rationing an ingredient they had used every day of their lives. In Canada, 1 litre of extra virgin olive oil that had cost $6.62 in March 2021 cost $15.93 by March 2024, 140% in 3 years. The criminal response was instant. Between 2018 and 2023, the European Union's Food Safety Alert System recorded 182 fraud notifications related to olive oil. Organized crime networks, which investigators call the agromafia, moved heavily into the market. Criminals added industrial chlorophyll to sunflower oil to fake the color. They added beta-carotene to canola oil to fake the taste. In 2024, a joint Spanish and Italian operation seized 260,000 liters of adulterated oil. In Puglia, authorities confiscated 42 tons of fake extra virgin in a single overnight raid on 18 warehouses. The 5th century Roman scam, reformulated with industrial chemistry. Meanwhile, Spain, which had largely escaped the Xylella outbreak, became the world's dominant producer, supplying around 40% of global output. The balance of the olive world, held since the Greeks first pressed oil on Minoan Crete, had shifted west. Today, more than 865 million olive trees are alive on Earth. The oil they produce moves through supply chains as vast and complex as anything Rome ever built, watched by Europol and EU food safety authorities and Interpol. The networks stretch from Andalusia to Tokyo, from Athens to Toronto. And then, something happened that no one in the grey fields of Puglia, or the ancient storerooms of Knossos, or the docks at Piraeus could have imagined. Someone put it on a rocket. In April 2022, Italian astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti boarded a SpaceX Dragon capsule at Kennedy Space Center in Florida and rode it to the International Space Station, 400 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. Among her cargo, 4 Italian extra virgin olive oils, selected for a scientific investigation jointly designed by the European Space Agency and the Italian Space Agency. The experiment had a name: extra virgin olive oil in space. The question researchers wanted to answer was not small. Olive oil is rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds. Scientists believe those properties could help protect astronauts on long-duration missions from cellular damage caused by cosmic radiation and the muscle deterioration caused by microgravity. But they needed to know whether the oil could survive the journey, whether cosmic radiation and zero gravity would alter its chemical profile, whether the antioxidants would hold. 3 samples were stowed aboard the station. The first was returned to Earth after 6 months, the second after 12 months. The third came back aboard the SpaceX Dragon capsule that splashed down off the coast of Florida on January 11, 2024, and was transferred to NASA's Kennedy Space Center for analysis. Researchers examined each sample's chemistry before and after spaceflight, comparing them to control bottles kept on the ground, looking for what 400 kilometers of altitude and cosmic bombardment does to an 8,000-year-old food. Cristoforetti, speaking from orbit, said she had no intention of going without it. "I would not forget to bring olive oil with me," she said, "which also gives flavor to anything, even the rehydrated salads that we eat up here." 8,000 years ago, someone pressed a bitter fruit and made something that burned in a lamp and softened skin. It anointed the athletes of Athens. It filled 53 million jars for Rome. It survived the fall of every empire that ever depended on it. And in 2022, it traveled to space in the cargo of an Italian astronaut to find out whether it could feed the people we are already planning to send beyond this sky. The same oil in a sealed container above the clouds, waiting to be measured. It began as something you could not eat, a bitter, wild fruit on a gnarled tree that nobody found appetizing, on a coast that now lies under the sea. Someone 8,000 years ago pressed it anyway, extracted something golden and grassy smelling that would burn without smoking, preserve without spoiling, soften without staining. Nobody thought it would still be relevant when humans left the planet. Nobody thought it would last long enough for Rome to be built, let alone fall. But here it is. It fed the Minoans and made Athens wealthy. It was the only thing Solon permitted to leave. It filled the storerooms at Knossos and the cargo holds at Piraeus and the 53 million jars that became a hill on the Tiber. It survived the empire's end in monastery cellars, kept alive by monks who needed it for their saints and their lamps. Arab scholars gave it new techniques and a new language, and their words for it are still in the Spanish kitchen today. It moved into 100 cuisines on 6 continents. It was counterfeited in the Roman Empire, and it is counterfeited now. It was worth protecting then, and it is locked behind glass today. It watched its oldest trees die in Puglia, trees that had outlasted every civilization that ever depended on them, killed by something that arrived on an ornamental plant from Costa Rica. It watched its price double and double again, while supermarkets hired guards and labs tested fake versions seized in overnight warehouse raids. And then Samantha Cristoforetti sealed it in a container, loaded it onto a rocket, and brought it to orbit. The world ran on it. It ran the Minoan economy and the Greek games and the Roman Empire and the medieval church and the Andalusian groves and every kitchen that ever poured it on bread or fish or roasted stone fruit. It ran on roads that no longer exist, in ships that have been silt for 2,000 years, in amphorae that are now a hill in Rome. Tonight, in some kitchen in Seville or Athens or Cape Town or Toronto, someone is opening a bottle and the smell is green and sharp and 8,000 years old. The world still runs on it. 400 kilometers above, we are just beginning to find out how far it can go. If any part of this story stopped you, leave it in the comments. The hill of 53 million jars, the farmer chaining himself to a dying tree, the astronaut, and the olive oil in space. And if you want more histories like this one, subscribing is how we keep making them.